So, welcome everybody. Day 6 of the New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Identification with the body. Apart from objects, another basic form of identification is with my body. Firstly, the body is male or female, and so the sense of being a man or woman takes up a significant part of most people's sense of self. Gender becomes identity. Identification with gender is encouraged at an early age, and it forces you into a role, into conditioned patterns of behavior that affect all aspects of your life, not just sexuality. It is a role many people become completely trapped in, even more so in some of the traditional societies than in Western culture, where identification with gender is beginning to lessen somewhat. In some traditional cultures, the worst fate a woman can have is to be unwed or barren, and for a man to lack sexual potency and not be able to produce children. Life's fulfillment is perceived to be fulfillment of one's gender identity. In the West, it is the physical appearance of the body that contributes greatly to the sense of who you think you are, its strength or weakness, its perceived beauty or ugliness relative to others. For many people, their sense of self worth is intimately bound up with their physical strength, good looks, fitness, and external appearance. Many feel a diminished sense of self worth because they perceive their body as ugly or imperfect. In some cases, the mental image or concept of my body is a complete distortion of reality. A young man may think, a young woman may think of herself as overweight and therefore starve herself when in fact she's quite thin. She cannot see her body anymore. All she sees is the mental concept of her body, which says, I am fat or I will become fat. At the root of this condition lies identification with the mind. As people have become more and more mind identified, which is the intensification of egoic dysfunction, there has also been a dramatic increase in the instance of anorexia in recent decades. If the sufferer could look at her body without the interfering judgments of her mind, or even recognize those judgments for what they are instead of believing in them, or better still, if she could feel her body from within, this would initiate her healing. It's very uh, it's a very common thing these days, because and I being part of healing profession, so there are a lot of cases where we get small girls, 12 years, 15 years, suffering from anorexia, and they body sham themselves also at times. But the real question is, ये सारी आइडेंटिफिकेशन का जो स्टार्ट है, it's from the ego. It's the ego that needs identification with a content. And this content, in a lot of cases, is our body. And especially if we talk about, each and every one, I'm sure everybody has come across people who are quite fit, but still are so in that thing that, I don't want to eat more, I might get fat, I'm on a diet, whatever is the identification. चाहे वो men है या it's a male character or a female character, the identification and association with this body as yourself is where the whole concept gets diswired. As a soul, we need to realize this, that the soul has chosen this body. And when I say this is my body, that means this body is given to me for a certain set of experiences which I, truly the soul, wants to experience on planet Earth. Because this body is not going to go beyond the realm of Earth. And the first thing that does when the soul exits the body is everybody will do the rituals for this physical body, because it belongs, and it starts from the 5 elements and it gets integrated back into the 5 elements of planet Earth. It does not go beyond it. So when we talk about our identification with this body or with this gender, the only thing that we need to remember is, for a certain set of experiences which the soul wants to learn the wisdom, this body is picked up and this particular gender is picked up. उससे ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं है. So, getting to the sense that I'm a male character of a male gender, so I am superior, or I'm a female these days and I'm equal. It's all the mind game. Because the whole concept of mind starts with a judgment, starts with a label, starts with a comparison. There is nothing known as somebody superior or somebody inferior. It's a gimmick created by the mind. Everybody has their equal set of responsibilities, equal set of experiences, and equal set of lessons to be learned by that soul through this body, whether it's a male or female, does not matter. And there's one question which derives all religious sects, religious sectors, and their preachers into a puzzle. When you ask them, is God male or is God female? And this is the answer where everybody has different views, and there is no right answer or a wrong answer. So whether the male is superior or the female is superior is nothing but a perceptionary game of the mind, where it wants to compare and where it wants to label higher, superior, smaller, inferior. Whereas both are equal. It is only that the gender is determined and chosen by the soul for that particular experience for which it is here on planet Earth. Nothing more, nothing less. So if we feel that we are men, we are superior, no, that's not the case. And if we are female, then we need to be at par or we are inferior, that's also not the case. Everybody has their own individualistic realization and value in whatever stage of journey they are here on planet Earth. और ये जेंडर आइडेंटिफिकेशन माइंड और ईगोइक माइंड की बनाई हुई है in order to play the game well of getting more attention. इसमें कुछ नहीं है. So stop identifying yourself with this body. In the sense, respect the body, because this is the seat of the soul. I mean, the soul could not do everything in the metaphysical. That is why it needed a body. So we need to respect the body. But when we get into that judgment and comparison, I'm superior, not superior, I'm male, female, that's, you don't need to give it any attention. It is just that for a particular experience, you have chosen this gender, you have chosen this body. And that's a gift. Just value it. Don't judge it, don't compare it. You are absolutely unique in whatever you are and wherever you are on this journey on planet Earth. Those who are identified with their good looks, physical strength, or abilities experience suffering when those attributes begin to fade and disappear, as of course they will. Their very identity that was based on them is then threatened with collapse. In either case, ugly or beautiful, people derive a significant part of their identity, be it negative or positive, from their body. To be more precise, they derive their identity from the I thought that they erroneously attach to the mental image or concept of their body, which, after all, is no more than a physical form that shares the destiny of all forms, impermanence, and ultimately decay. Equating the physical sense perceived body that is destined to grow old, wither, and die with I always leads to suffering sooner or later. To refrain from identifying with the body doesn't mean that you neglect, despise, or no longer care for it. If it is strong, beautiful, or vigorous, you can enjoy and appreciate those attributes while they last. You can also improve the body's condition through right nutrition and exercise. If you don't equate the body with who you are, when beauty fades, vigor diminishes, or the body becomes incapacitated, this will not affect your sense of worth or identity in any way. In fact, as the body begins to weaken, the formless dimension, the light of consciousness, can shine more easily through the fading form. It is not just people with good or near perfect bodies who are likely to equate it with who they are. You can just as easily identify with the problematic body and make the body's imperfection, illness, or disability into your identity. You may then think and speak of yourself as a sufferer of this or that chronic illness or disability. You receive a great deal of attention from doctors and others who constantly confirm to your conceptual identity as a sufferer or a patient. You then unconsciously cling to illness because it has become the most important part of who you perceive yourself to be. It has become another thought form with which the ego can identify. And once the ego has found an identity, it does not want to let go. Amazingly, but not infrequently, the ego is in search of a stronger identity and can and does create illnesses in order to strengthen itself through them. And that's one of the major reasons when you're in any alternative modality field is you do not call anybody who's coming to you or seeking some kind of a help, some kind of a support. You never call them a patient. You always call them as a client, because we do not want to label them as that they are suffering. They could be going through a phase where there is slight dis-ease in some part of their body, but that does not label them as a sufferer, because everything which is happening as part of your set of experiences on planet Earth is there only and only for a lesson that the soul wants to learn. Be it, and it's amazing that we've seen so many people, have a certain kind of a state of dis-ease, and when they actually explore that state of that, who the body is in that state of dis-ease, they not only conquer that state of a disease, but they eventually get to a place of empowerment where they are able to help others as well as help themselves. And that's very, very common when we look at the alternative or other modalities of healing. Very common. बिकॉज हम उसको लेबल नहीं करते हैं, बिकॉज जब हमने एक चीज को लेबल कर दिया कि यार ये तो पेशेंट है, ही इज नॉट वेल, नो, it's just that he is not aware of a certain things where each and everything has been affecting a particular part of his body. Because when we talk about all states of disease in the body, each and every disease has a psychosomatic cause. And it's a huge line when you talk about psychosomatics of all diseases. And we've had great people like Louis Hay, who's given so many of these affirmations and talked about why this is happening, what is the psychosomatic behind these things. And you have other people like Everett Rose and so many others who've talked about the psychosomatic of diseases. So it's psychosomatic of diseases is nothing but a thought related with that disease. So that does not make the person a sufferer. It's just that he is unaware why this is happening. And in a lot of cases, is that awareness of why this is happening to that person is narrated and explained in a good manner, strong chances that disease goes away. I've seen it a lot of things in my personal life as well as people around me, and it's true. Feeling the inner body, although body identification is one of the most basic forms of ego, the good news is that it is also the one that you can most easily go beyond. This is done not by trying to convince yourselves that you are not your body, but by shifting your attention from the external form of your body and from thoughts about your body. Beautiful, ugly, strong, weak, too fat, too thin, to the feeling of aliveness inside it. No matter what your body's appearance is on the outer level, beyond the outer form, it is an intensely alive energy field. If you're not familiar with the inner body awareness, close your eyes for a moment. I would like everybody to do this practice along. Just close your eyes for a moment. Take 3 nice deep breaths. And slowly feel the life inside your hands. Don't ask this to your mind. Don't let the mind interfere, because the mind will say, I can't feel anything. Or it might just say, give me something more interesting to think about. So instead of asking your mind, ask and go to your hands directly. By this, I mean, become aware of the subtle feeling of aliveness inside your hands. It's there. You just have to go there with your awareness, with your attention, to notice it, to take note of it. You may also get some slight tingling sensations at first. And then a feeling of energy or aliveness comes in. Now, if you hold your attention in your hands for a while, this sense of aliveliness will surely intensify. Some people won't even have to close their eyes to feel it. They will be able to feel their inner hands at the same time as they're reading this book. And slowly take your awareness to your feet. Keep your attention there for some time. And now begin to feel your hands and feet at the same time. Then you can also incorporate other parts of your body, your legs, your arms, your abdomen, your chest, and so on. And feel and get into that feeling and be aware of the inner body inside of you, which is the global sense of aliveness. Feel the same. Feel the inner body. And slowly bring your awareness into the here and now. You can open your eyes and bring your awareness back to yourself and slowly, gently open your eyes. Now, this is a short glimpse of the inner body, which is alive inside. So beyond the skin, because the skin is a part of our boundary which is created to distinguish each and every individual. So this inner body is inside that layers of skin which is truly alive inside of you. What I call the inner body isn't really the body anymore, but life energy. It's the bridge between form and formless. Make it a habit to feel the inner body as often as you can. After a while, you won't need to close your eyes anymore to feel it. For example, see if you can feel the inner body when you listen to someone. It almost seems like a paradox. When you are in touch with the inner body, you are not identified with your body anymore, nor are you identified with your mind. This is to say, you are no longer identified with form, but moving away from form identification towards formlessness, which we may also call being. It is your essence identity. Body awareness not only anchors you in the present moment, it is a doorway out of the prison that is the ego. And it also strengthens the immune system and the body's ability to heal itself. Forgetfulness of being. Ego is always identified with form, seeking yourself and thereby losing yourself in some form. Forms are not just material objects and physical bodies. More fundamental than the external forms, things and bodies are the thought forms that continuously arise in the field of consciousness. They are energy formations, finer and less dense than physical matter, but they are forms nonetheless. What you may be aware of as a voice in your head that never stops speaking in the stream of incessant and compulsive thinking, when every thought absorbs your attention completely, when you are so identified with the voice in your head and the motions that accompany it, that you lose yourself in every thought and every emotion, then you are totally identified with form and therefore in the grip of ego. Ego is a conglomeration of recurring thought forms and conditioned mental emotional patterns that are invested with a sense of I, a sense of self. Ego arises when your sense of beingness of I am, which is formless consciousness, gets mixed up with form. This is the meaning of identification. This is forgetfulness of being, the primary error, the illusion of absolute separateness that turns reality into a nightmare. So, this is where everything got confused. What we were looking for as a being is to be connected to who we truly are. And who we truly are is formless, does not have a form. But हमारी confusion क्या हुई? We were feeling that consciousness, that beingness, that awareness inside our body, but what we could see was only the body. And what we could hear was only the chatterbox of the mind. So what we did was we actually confused ourselves that this body is me and this mind is me. Whereas this body belongs to the soul and this mind belongs to the soul. So anything and everything that the individual connects through the five senses, because the food for the ego is always through the five senses. What you can see, what you can touch, what you can smell, what you can taste, and what you can hear. Anything and everything the ego को input जो मिलता है वो five senses से मिलता है. And that's the limiting capacity of the ego. So any identification is with what I can see, what I can smell, what I can taste, what I can hear, what I can touch. Anything beyond that, anything beyond those five senses is beyond the purview of the ego. So when you feel something which you cannot see, which you cannot touch, which you cannot taste, which you cannot smell, that is beyond the ego's recognition. And that is your true self. And in a lot of these rigorous spiritual retreats, they actually make you close your eyes, close your ears, so that you are able to transcend beyond the sensory experiences into the realization of who you truly are, into the realization of the true being inside of you, which can only be felt. It cannot be seen, touched, smelled, heard, or tasted. Anything and everything that is from the sensory perceptions is from a perspective of the mind, from a perspective of the egoistic part of the mind as well. So when you move beyond the sensory experiences, that is where you start realizing and experiencing your true being. And when we talk about meditation, you have your eyes closed, but you can still visualize certain things. You might be hearing something if it's a guided meditation or if there is music, but you cannot smell anything if the environment is clean, and you cannot taste anything, and you cannot touch anything. So four senses primarily are not confusing you, but still the mind will play a game. It's only when you stop your association with the thought of the mind that you make a conscious shift in your awareness towards towards experience which is beyond the sensory perceptions of your own self, where ego does not play a role. So meditation is one of the basic things that you all must get into in order to go beyond the sensory perceptions and go beyond the purview of the ego, which is created boundaries of all five senses that, it's like there's nothing beyond those that. So there is a world which is waiting for you to discover, and that is beyond your sensory perceptions. And yes, meditation is one of the finest ways to get onto that. From Descartes' error to Sartre's insight. The 17th century philosopher Descartes, regarded as the founder of modern philosophy, gave expression to this primary error with his famous dictum, which he saw as primary truth. I think, therefore I am. This was the answer he found to the question, is there anything I can know with absolute certainty? He realized that the fact that he was always thinking was beyond doubt, and so he equated thinking with being. That is to say, identity, I am, with thinking. Instead of the ultimate truth, he had found the root of the ego, but he didn't know that. It took almost 300 years before another famous philosopher saw something in that statement that Descartes, as well as everybody else, had overlooked. And his name was Jean-Paul Sartre. He looked at Descartes' statement, I think, therefore I am, very deeply, and suddenly realized in his own words, the consciousness that says I am is not the consciousness that thinks. I repeat, the consciousness that says I am is not the consciousness that thinks. What did he mean by that? When you are aware that you are thinking, that awareness is not part of thinking. It is a different dimension of consciousness. And it is that awareness that says, I am. If there were nothing but thought in you, you wouldn't even know you are thinking. You would be like a dreamer who doesn't know what he's dreaming. You would be as identified with every thought as the dreamer is with every image in the dream. Many people still live like that, like sleepwalkers trapped in old dysfunctional mindsets that continuously recreate the same nightmarish reality. When you know you are dreaming, you are aware within the dream another dimension of consciousness has come in. The implication of Sartre's insight is profound, but he himself was still too identified with thinking to realize the full significance of what he had discovered and emerging new dimensions of consciousness. So when he's trying to say, I think, therefore I am, you just need to ask this question: who is the one who is thinking? And if there is a particular one who is thinking, who is aware that somebody is thinking or something is thinking something? So the soul inside is aware that these thoughts are coming from the mind. Because the soul is that, awareness inside of you. Who is truly aware? It's only that the mind starts to come back again and again to interfere and misguide that awareness, that soul of who you truly are. So when you get to this sentence, I think, therefore I am. So you need to be very, very clear. I am that awareness which is aware that the mind is thinking. The peace that passes all understanding. There are many accounts of people who experience that emerging new dimension of consciousness as a result of tragic loss at some point in their lives. Some lost all their possessions, others their children or spouse, their social positions, reputation, or physical abilities. In some cases, through disaster or war, they lost all these simultaneously and found themselves with nothing. We may call this a limit situation. Whatever they had identified with, whatever gave them their sense of self, had been taken away. Then suddenly and inexplicably, the anguish or intense fear they initially felt gave way to a scared sense of presence, a deep peace and serenity, and complete freedom from fear. This phenomena must have been familiar to Saint Paul, who used the expression, the peace of God, which passeth all understanding. It is indeed a peace that doesn't seem to make sense, and the people who experienced it asked themselves, in the face of this, how can it be that I feel such peace? The answer is simple. Once you realize what the ego is and how it works, when forms that you had identified with, that gave you your sense of self, collapse or are taken away, it can lead to a collapse of the ego, since ego is identification with form. When there is nothing to identify with anymore, who are you? When forms around you die or death approaches, your sense of beingness, of I am, is freed from its entanglement with form. Spirit is released from its imprisonment in matter. You realize your essential identity as formless, as an all pervasive presence of being prior to all forms, all identifications. You realize your true identity as consciousness itself, rather than what consciousness has identified with. That's the peace of God. The ultimate truth of who you are is not in I am this or I am that, but just plain simple I am. Not everybody who experiences great loss also experiences this awakening, this disidentification from form. Some immediately create a strong mental image or thought form in which they see themselves as a victim, whether it be of circumstances, other people, an unjust fate, or God. This thought form and the emotions it creates, such as anger, resentment, self pity, and so on, they strongly identify with, and it immediately takes the place of all the other identifications that have collapsed through the loss. In other words, the ego quickly finds a new form. The fact that this new form is a deeply unhappy one doesn't concern the ego too much, as long as it has an identity, good or bad. In fact, this new ego will be more contracted, more rigid, and impenetrable than the old one. Whenever tragic loss occurs, you either resist or you yield. Some people become bitter or deeply resentful, others become compassionate, wise, and loving. Yielding means inner acceptance of what is. You are open to life. Resistance is an inner contraction, a hardening of the shell of the ego. You are closed. Whatever action you take in a state of inner resistance, which we could also call negativity, will create more outer resistance, and the universe will not be on your side. Life will not be helpful. If the shutters are closed, the sunlight cannot come in. When you yield internally, when you surrender, a new dimension of consciousness opens up. If action is possible or necessary, your action will be in alignment with the whole and supported by creative intelligence. The unconditioned consciousness, which in a state of inner openness, you become one with. Circumstances and people then become helpful, cooperative. Coincidences happen. If no action is possible, you rest in peace and inner stillness that comes with surrender. You rest in God.